Hey, it's CJ Wilson here with Doak Talk. I have another episode of Behind Enemy Lines for you guys, and I have a special guest with me today. I have Stephen Thomas, a sports reporter for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Stephen, how's it going?
Going really well. Going really well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, most definitely appreciate you joining, man. It's a pleasure to have you on. Have some insight of the Pitt Panthers leading into this big time ACC showdown between Florida State and Pitt. Both teams are 3-2 coming into this game. But before we jump into the meat and potatoes of everything, I want you guys to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Go ahead and hit the like button. It takes 2 seconds out of your time, and go ahead and join the Dope Talk Sports community and hit that like button. I'm sorry, hit the subscribe button. All right, Steve, let's jump right into it, man. First of all, I appreciate you coming on. Like I stated before, Pitt is 3-2 on the season. Let's talk about this Pat Narduzzi version of the Pitt Panthers for the 2025 season before we start talking about position by position and things like that.
Yeah, it was a team with some high expectations, I think, coming into this year. Returned a lot offensively. Desmond Reed, All-American running back, paired to really outstanding linebackers, Kyle Lewis and Rasheed Biles. A ton of depth up front of the defensive line, and then obviously returning starting quarterback Eli Holstein. The season hasn't exactly gone to plan, I would say. Losing to West Virginia in Morgantown was pretty bad for this team. Felt like a pretty low moment for the program as a whole. And then, kind of fumbling away that Louisville game as well. I think the feeling up here is that Pitt kind of gave two games away, those two losses that they have, and that they were games that they probably should have won. I think that's kind of what led to maybe an urgent or early decision to change quarterbacks, bring in the freshman Mason Heinschel, who played really well against Boston College, and they lit up Boston College, but I think it would have been a bigger concern if they didn't beat them by 40 points or whatever they did. So a bit of a kind of up and down season. I think we're still waiting to see what the truest version of this Pitt team is. Defensively, they really fit into, I guess, what Pat Narduzzi would really like, which is they're really good up front. They are super aggressive. They can stop the run really well. Leaky at times on the back end. They're still fitting some pieces in at safety and or in the secondary, especially at corner. They've had some injuries there, but when Pat Narduzzi imagines the perfect defense for himself, it starts with being able to stop the run and playing well up front.
Yeah.
And then, offensively, they move pretty fast. They have good tempo. They throw the ball a ton, and so they put a lot on that freshman Mason Heinschel as well. So he handled it against Boston College, but this is, I guess they've gone down to Morgantown and played in a hostile environment, but at least in ACC play, this is the first time that they'll face a really animated crowd, and it's going to be one of the tougher places that they play all year, really.
Yeah, definitely. Doak is one of those venues. But yeah, like I said, you started the season. Let's focus on the quarterback really quick. You started the season with Eli, and like you said, Mason came in and played. Now BC is bad. Like you stated, you guys were expected to dominate them, but this kid played lights out, 30 for 41, 323 and 4 touchdowns. Like so, you put a lot in the passing game, and this kid answered the bell. Let's talk about Mason and I guess what you've been hearing and seeing in practice leading up to this decision, and then with that decision being made, how he responded to it.
Yeah, Coach Narduzzi tried to keep it under wraps for as long as he could. The official, you could call it, announcement didn't really come until Saturday morning, I guess you would say. But people have been hearing stuff, pretty much all week that Pitt was going to make a change at quarterback and that it would be Mason Heinschel. Mature kid for his age. He's only 18 years old, but as soon as he arrived back in January, people were raving about the kind of stuff that he was able to do just as a freshman quarterback playing his first season of college football, and he kind of showed that on the field against Boston College. Even understanding how bad BC has been this year. Really live arm. He can really spin it. Didn't really get to show off kind of his deep ball abilities, which I think he can certainly throw it deep, but just really efficient on throws on those intermediate throws. He was able to keep Pitt, on schedule. Quite frankly, they put a lot on his plate, and then when they got into third or fourth and longs, he was able to really deliver. He's just got a super strong arm. He's accurate. He makes good decisions. He hasn't really been tested yet, like I've said, but a lot of the physical traits you can really like. He's a little more mobile than I thought he was. His ability to kind of extend plays and keep his eyes upfield while he scrambles was really, really impressive. And he created some extra yards and some extra plays for Pitt last Saturday that they might not have gotten with Eli Holstein, who when he sees an opportunity to scramble, he's running to get yards on the ground. But yeah, it's Heinschel, I think, was much more effective at kind of keeping his eyes downfield and creating stuff in the passing game when he was flushed out of the pocket. So lot to be excited about, and you can see why they turned to this kid and were so excited about his future when he arrived. But I think everyone's also really eager to see how he reacts to a bit more, definitely more difficult opponent, and like I said, the environment that he's going to be in on Saturday.
Let's move on to the running back position because you spoke a little bit about it, but I guess you could say golf has kind of been taking the majority of the carries. Was there an injury to Reed or something along those lines?
Yeah, so Desmond Reed went down early in the West Virginia game in week 3 with what was described as a lower body injury. It was a little weird. He kept, he was in pads the entire time, kept his helmet on, stayed on the sidelines. And so we didn't learn until, after the fact that he would be out for a little bit. And we haven't really gotten an official diagnosis or prognosis of how long he's going to be out for. I don't think he'll play this weekend, and I wouldn't expect that he will play, really anytime soon, to be quite honest. If he's back before the end of October, I think I would be pretty surprised. So Pitt's going to have to make do without him. I think the good news is that, like you said, Goff has been pretty effective. So they've got two kids, Juelz Goff, who's a redshirt freshman, and then Jakarian Turner, who's a true freshman. Then we kind of filling in, doing a running back by committee type of thing, and I think have been pretty effective. Pitt, is for the season, I think like 60-40 pass to run. I think there's an opportunity to run the ball a little bit more. I think this offensive line is capable of creating lanes for him, and these running backs are pretty good. I think especially Goff has shown that he's pretty effective. He doesn't give you the same kind of home run hitting ability that Desmond Reed has, where he can on any given play take it 70 yards. But he's pretty effective between the tackles. Goff is a little bit bigger than Desmond Reed, who's I think listed at a generous 5'8" on the roster at 175 pounds. So I think they've got some more solid runners, but those guys still have speed too. So guys who fit into the system, and I think have played pretty well to date. I think there's some room to give them some more carries and for Pitt to establish itself more on the ground. They just kind of haven't gotten to that stage of the offense yet so far. They've really wanted to air it out more often than not.
Yeah, you brought up a point about not being as explosive as Reed, and it shows that these two running backs have been productive. Reed has averaged in the early part of the season 5.9 per carry, which is a yard more than what Turner has, which is the current lead within the running back group. So that's a very good point. Now moving on to the receivers, you said that Pitt likes to toss the ball around a little bit, and it's a three-headed monster a little bit with Williams, Johnson, and Hicks. Just talk about what those three guys bring to the table, and hell, even Gates as the fourth receiver, he's had some production thus far in the season. So a lot of, I guess you could say, options within the receiver room.
Yeah, Kenny Johnson is probably the most complete guy at receiver. They had talked through the first, 4 or 5 weeks that, they really needed to get him the ball more. He wasn't as productive, through those first 4 weeks as he was, certainly on Saturday when he had career highs and catches and yards and he caught a touchdown pass. Kenny can kind of, in my opinion, do it all. He can catch the deep ball, but he showed a lot as kind of a possession receiver, a sharper route runner. He's got strong hands. So I think they're definitely going to try to get him more involved. Whoever Florida State's best corner is, I expect him to be on Kenny Johnson for most of the afternoon. But yeah, there are threats all over. On any given day, I think there's a different guy that could lead Pitt in receiving. Poppy Williams has kind of shown a lot of the explosive playability that Eli Holstein was certainly really good at, and that Pitt kind of wants to be known for. But he's also gotten a little bit stronger over the offseason so that he can create some yards after the catch. And I think that's been big for him to kind of take a step forward in the early parts of this year. Blue Hicks is probably one of my favorite players on this team. He's got speed. He's a good route runner. He's not huge, not a big dude in particular, but he can go up and get a jump ball. He's been one of those, I guess you could call him a surprise. I don't think people expected much from him when he transferred in from Louisville. Um, he's caught a few touchdown passes, but more often than not, I think he's been more quiet than anything. Outside of a really big opening game against Duquesne. So it'll be interesting to see where they're able to get him involved. I think he can also he's capable of kind of taking short passes, screens, things of that nature, and taking them a long way because he's got some good speed. You mentioned Bryce Yates, who's had some big catches this year, but I would say their fourth receiver right now is Deuce Spann, actually a transfer from Florida State. A little bit of a bigger body. He's been on kick return, but they like his long range speed. Yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
no,
made
no,
a few plays here and there. I think they're trying to get him more involved. Yeah. Trying to get him a little bit more involved too. But it's a pretty deep receiver room, so they've got kind of their top 3 or 4 guys, but they're going to try to mix people in as much as possible.
And shout out to Deuce, man. I like that. All right, see, let's talk about the offensive line. You said it was a veteran group. Let's talk about some standout players within the offensive line that FSU should be concerned about.
Yeah, I would argue their best offensive lineman is Lyndon Cooper, the center, transfer from NC State, second year starting at Pitt. Really solid. Just kind of knows what he's doing, knows the offense, everything like that. BJ Williams has been a 3-year starter. He's a junior, but has played since his freshman year at Pitt. That he's at the left guard spot. Jeff Percy, the left tackle, is a transfer from Michigan, who I think got off to a really good start this year. Had a couple issues with penalties, especially in the West Virginia game, but I think overall been really solid, especially as a run blocker. The thing is that he got hurt in the BC game. It didn't seem like it was super serious. I believe he stayed on the sideline and was just kind of working out on the exercise bike for most of the afternoon. And Pitt able to throw a guy, Kendall Stanley, in a transfer from Charlotte, who's their backup left tackle, and they have a lot of confidence in. He was battling with Percy throughout training camp for that starting spot. He played well enough against BC, but they would definitely hope to have Percy in the lineup on Saturday. But we'll kind of have to wait and see what the deal is with him. Like I said, I don't think that's serious, so I'm fairly confident that he would be out there. Percy, that is. And then on the right side, things get a little shakier. Keith Gueva, another transfer, super senior guy, transferred in this year. He got hurt in the Louisville game, season-ending leg injury. So Ryan Coretta, who's kind of their backup center and kind of first one of those first or second linemen off the bench, he's filling in at right guard right now. Again, another guy who played pretty well against BC, but everyone played well against BC. It's hard to really judge just how good he is. And then Ryan Baer, another guy who's been a multi-year starter and you know has had his issues. I think overall been pretty solid. I think he's talented and like athletic, but I think they would really hope for him to be a little bit sharper. Giving up some sacks, committed some penalties as well. So it's a group that I think is more than the sum of their parts, right? Like none of these guys were super highly recruited, coming out of their respective schools or coming into Pitt, but I think they've started to gel a little bit. It'd be interesting to see how they do with maybe some new faces in there. But it is a group with some experience, even considering the injuries that they have.
All right, let's go and shift to the defensive side of the football, which is Narduzzi's baby. Speak about the defense line and what they bring to the table. Some players that stand out.
Yeah, the defensive line has been really good, I think, this year, especially the defensive tackle group. So it's really a four-man group there. Like they rotate a ton on the defensive end. Sorry, I'm pulling up a flip card so I don't forget any names. But Francis Brew, Isaiah Neal, Sean Fitzsimmons, and Nick James are really the guys to know at defensive tackle. It'll be interesting to see what the defensive end spot looks like this weekend because Pitt's had some injuries there. And Isaiah Neal is a little bit of an undersized guy. I think he's about 270 pounds. But they bumped him out actually to play some defensive end this week against Boston College. And it's a thing they've experimented with a little bit, but he looked really good at that defensive end spot. Good pass rusher. Like I said, a little bit undersized, but he's quick. So maybe a better fit at that defensive end spot. The defensive end spot, I think Pitt's gotten some good production there, but again, they've had some injuries. So, Blaine Spires, who's been really good for them this year, another older transfer, didn't play last week against Boston College. Jaden Moore, a transfer from Oregon, hasn't played yet this season. He suffered an injury in the preseason. Jimmy Scott is kind of the stalwart guy there. Kind of a breakout year last year. He had 6.5 sacks. A little quiet through the start of this year. I think they're waiting for him to break through, but a lot of talent. And he's been creating pressure, just not finishing off sacks. But I think this defensive line group is really good. It's pretty deep, and that's why they've been able to survive an injury or two here and there. So the Pitt is, in my opinion, and some of the stats back this up, I think they're first in the country in, yards per carry allowed. They're second in rushing yards per game allowed. They are a pretty elite run defense. And I know they're running into a really good rushing offense this week, but, it all starts with that defensive line. I think Sean Fitzsimmons, that's a guy that I mentioned, people have been waiting for him to really have a breakout year for a long time now up here in Pittsburgh. And hasn't been healthy all the way through his career, but that is a guy who I think can be a game wrecker in this one. Just really strong, capable of pushing guards back into the backfield. And he leads a really strong defensive line group, I think.
Yeah, that's very impressive. And let's talk about the linebackers. So it's a few names that's been standing out to me because, of course, to my run defense, the D line and the linebackers they go hand in hand, right? So Biles, Brookings, and
Mhm.
Lovelace are three of the linebackers that I've been in a few clips I saw of Pitt have been standing out a little bit. Let's talk about what those guys bring to the table.
Yeah, so I mean, it's funny you bring up Brookins because he plays safety, but man, he loves to live in the box. That dude can hit.
Oh, yeah, my apologies.
But yeah, the starting linebacker group. Yep, Kyle Lewis. Yeah. So no, it's a really good linebacker group, and it's good to the point that they weren't they had a couple games that were okay against Boston College or against West Virginia and Louisville, and everyone thought kind of the sky was falling to a certain extent. They were like, "Where's Kyle Lewis?" But Kyle Lewis shows up with the fumble recovery and a few big plays against Boston College, and you start to realize what this group can be. It's interesting. Lewis was kind of the superstar last year. Now it seems like Biles has kind of become the more productive player, but they are both super talented. They're both guys who I think can expect to play in the NFL as early as next year if they so choose. And then you got Braylon Lovelace in the middle, who is just a super smart and really solid tackler, a guy who played right away as a freshman, and now that the depth chart is kind of cleared up, he's taken full advantage of his opportunity at inside linebacker at that middle linebacker spot. So not a ton of depth here. They had some injuries in the preseason that really handicapped what they're able to do. Haven't really mixed in their backups a lot. They've talked about wanting to do that more, but it just hasn't really happened. Cam Lindsey is a guy to watch. You could maybe see some snaps. Nick Lappy as well, former walk on. But those top three guys are going to play a lot. So on a hot day when Florida State's running the ball a lot, I'm really interested to see how much Pitt is able to rotate and how much they do choose to rotate. Given that I think they're really going to need those starting guys out there, their stars to play a lot of snaps.
I think that's going to be the matchup of the game, so to speak. Florida State's run offense versus Pitt's run defense. I know within the last few games, Florida State's kind of gotten away with what they wanted to do and throwing the ball a little bit too much. I think they want to try to get back to that. And of course, going against a tough Pitt team in regards to stopping the run, it's going to be, in my opinion, the matchup of the game. All right, so moving on to the defensive backs, which is my favorite position. You mentioned Brookings as well. That's a guy that's kind of in the box. Talk about other defensive backs that FSU should be on notice for within this game.
Yeah, Rashad Battle is probably the team's best corner right now. They're pretty young at that position and a little banged up. It's a secondary that they will have some chances to hit on big plays against. That's just kind of the nature of how Pitt plays defense. So yeah, Battles they're probably their quote unquote best corner. They'll bring in Shadarian Harrison, who is a guy who took a lot of steps forward in the spring and really kind of cemented himself as a guy who's going to be in that starting rotation. Sean Lee Jr. is a freshman who this team really loves. I think he's definitely a little green and definitely has some growing to do. Those are a couple guys that I think Florida State might try to go after when they put the ball in the air, especially because Florida State's got a little bit of size at receiver. Pitt um, doesn't exactly have that. So yeah, some opportunities to hit on some big pass plays against those corners, and then at safety, it's going to be interesting because Brookins has been really good all year. Hasn't necessarily come up with a lot of the splash plays that he became known for last year, but really solid down to down. And then there's Javon McIntyre, who's a veteran dude, a little bit vulnerable in pass coverage. I think a guy who at times during his career has given up some big plays in the passing game. He's also a little bit banged up. I think he was probably on a pitch count last week when he was coming back from an injury. And then there's Kavir Baines Marquez, another older transfer, kind of one of the ways that Pitt tried to supplement this roster. He's been really good, I think, the past couple weeks, both against Louisville when McIntyre was hurt and he had to kind of come in some spot duties, and then last week against Boston College, he really popped as well. Solid tackler, but just kind of by nature, like I said, Pitt plays a style of defense where they want to sell out against the run. So it means just committing a lot of bodies into the box and leaving their defensive backs out on islands, and that means that if you're Thomas Castellanos, if you're Deuce Robinson, you're going to have some chances to make some big plays if you can win against those corners and those safeties.
I like it. Real interesting. And FSU likes to take shots down the field with some playmakers at receiver, so that will be interesting to watch as well. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. What everyone has been waiting for. Give me your prediction. Pittsburgh comes into town. Both teams are 3-2, and desperate in regards to where they want to be as far as ACC aspirations. So go ahead and give me your score prediction for this game.
Yeah, look, I think Pitt's an improved team. I think the switch at quarterback was necessary and is going to end up paying off for them down the road. This might just not be the spot. Pitt's been really good against the run. I think Gus Malzahn, who I have a ton of respect for, like I really really enjoy watching his teams play football and play offense, especially. I think he's going to have some stuff cooked up that'll help break some long runs and some big plays for Florida State. Um, and it's just hard to count on a true freshman, being as calm and collected and as efficient in his first start on the road as he was, at home against a team like Boston College. Just doesn't seem like a great spot. I don't think losing this game would necessarily mean that Pitt's season is over. It's just hard to imagine that, they will be able to, with a bunch of moving parts, with some injuries and everything like that, be able to pull this one out. So I don't think a lot of points are going to be put up, but I would say probably, if I had to guess, probably 24-20 Florida State wins.
I like it. All right, so in regards to my prediction, I like what the freshman Mason does. He brings a different element to the game. Hopefully, like you said, it's going to be a road game. Doak Stadium, one of the, I guess you could say, one of the most toughest environments in ACC play in regards to play at. So that's going to be interesting as well, and it's going to be different athletes on the side of the ball as well too, versus what he saw against BC. But again, he brought a lot of things to the table. I do want to see Tony White probably try to confuse the freshman, throw different looks at him since he is so young. But to your point, I really think the biggest matchup is going to be what FSU likes to do in running the football and what Pitt likes to do in stopping the football. And you stated that Pitt gives up some opportunities in the pass game. FSU, in my opinion, has been passing the ball a little bit too much these last few games, so you got to pick your spots against Pitt. 6 turnovers versus Virginia and Miami. Can't do that against a pretty good, solid Pittsburgh team, in my opinion. I'm gonna go 35-27 FSU.
I would not be surprised to see that at all. I think there'll be some opportunities for FSU to really kind of overwhelm the freshmen and make enough plays on offense.
All right, perfect. I like it, Stephen. It's been a pleasure. Let the people know where they can find you at.
Yeah, you can read my work at post-gazette.com. We do a bunch of shows on YouTube at PG Pitt on YouTube. And then I'm on Twitter at Stephen E. Tom. So it's just my last name, my full name, minus the last four letters on Twitter.
Perfect. Sounds good. And make sure you guys check out Stephen and all the content he has to offer. Again, make sure you guys like this video and subscribe to the channel. Appreciate you coming on, man.
Thank you for having me.